The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle. Introduction. Imagine a competition. On one side, you have a team of brilliant, experienced business school students. Sharp, analytical, and professional. They strategize, they debate, they plan with precision. On the other side, a team of kindergartners. They don't strategize. They barely talk. They just huddle together, grabbing at materials, trying things, failing, and trying again. The challenge is simple. Build the tallest possible tower using 20 sticks of uncooked spaghetti, a yard of tape, a yard of string, and a single marshmallow. The one rule? The marshmallow has to be on top. Now, if you had to bet your life savings on one of these teams, who would you choose? It's not even a question, right? You'd bet on the business students. They have the skills, the experience, the intelligence. It's like betting on a heavyweight champion against a toddler. And yet, you would lose. In dozens of trials of this exact experiment, the kindergartners consistently build towers that are more than double the height of the ones built by the business students. The business students' towers often collapse entirely. This isn't a fluke. It's a paradox that reveals a deep, fundamental truth about how great groups work. It tells us that we've been looking at success all wrong. We focus on individual brilliance, on talent, on skill. But the kindergartners show us that what truly matters isn't what a group has. It's what a group does. It's about the invisible connections, the unspoken language that allows ordinary people to achieve extraordinary things together. So, how do they do it? What is this secret language? For years, author Daniel Coyle traveled the world, embedding himself within some of the planet's most successful groups: Navy SEALs, the San Antonio Spurs, Pixar animation studios, even a notorious gang of jewel thieves. He was searching for the answer to that very question. And what he found wasn't 100 different secrets, but just three. Three simple, learnable skills that act as the code, the culture code, for unlocking a group's true potential. This isn't just another book about teamwork. It's a journey into the hidden machinery of human connection. It's a practical guide to transforming any group you're a part of, your family, your sports team, your future company, into something greater than the sum of its parts. By the end of our time together today, you will understand these three skills. You will see how they work, why they matter, and how you can start using them to build the kinds of groups that don't just succeed, but thrive. So, let's begin by cracking the first part of the code. Let's figure out why those kindergartners, with their sticky fingers and chaotic energy, hold the first secret to building a world-class team. Book summary. So, what was really happening in that spaghetti tower challenge? The business students, for all their intelligence, weren't actually collaborating. They were caught in a subtle dance of status management. Who's in charge here? Can I challenge that idea without looking stupid? What are the unspoken rules? Instead of focusing on the real problem, the fact that a marshmallow is surprisingly heavy and spaghetti is fragile, they were focused on each other. They were navigating their own uncertainty. Their interactions looked smooth, but underneath, they were hesitant and inefficient. The kindergartners, on the other hand, weren't managing status. They didn't care who was in charge. They stood shoulder to shoulder, working together as a single entity. They weren't afraid to try something and have it fail. They grabbed spaghetti, they tried taping it, it broke, they tried again. Their actions looked chaotic, but their process was incredibly smart. They were experimenting, getting feedback from reality, and adjusting. They weren't smarter individuals. They were working together in a smarter way. And the reason they could do that comes down to the first and most important skill of the culture code: build safety. Now, when we hear the word safety, we often think of something soft, something comfortable. But in the context of a group, Safety isn't about being cozy. It's about being secure enough to take risks. Psychological safety is the foundation upon which every great culture is built. It's the feeling that you can be vulnerable, you can make a mistake, you can speak up, and you won't be punished or humiliated for it. Think of it like this: our brains are ancient survival machines. For hundreds of thousands of years, being rejected from the tribe meant death. So, a part of our brain, the amygdala, is constantly scanning our environment, asking one question over and over: are we safe here? When the answer is no, our brain goes into self-preservation mode. We become defensive, we hide our weaknesses, and we focus on our own status, just like the business students. But when the answer is a resounding yes, that same part of the brain switches roles. It stops being a guard dog and becomes an energetic guide dog, dedicated to building and strengthening social bonds. It's a total reconfiguration of our motivational system. So, how do great groups send the signal that you are safe here? It's not through grand speeches or posters on the wall. It's through a constant stream of what Coyle calls belonging cues. These are the tiny, almost invisible signals that we send to each other that say, "I see you. You are part of this group. We share a future." These cues can be incredibly simple: eye contact, active listening, a small physical touch like a fist bump, asking questions, and showing that you value someone's unique contribution. Coyle tells a fascinating story from a study called the Bad Apple Experiment. Researchers put 4-person groups together to work on a marketing plan. But secretly, one person in each group was an actor, hired to be a bad apple. Sometimes he'd play the jerk, being aggressive and defiant. Sometimes he was the slacker, withholding effort. And sometimes he was the downer, acting depressed and tired. In almost every single group, the bad apple's behavior was contagious. His negativity dropped the group's performance by 30 to 40%. When he was a slacker, everyone else slacked off. When he was a downer, the whole room's energy just deflated. Except for one group. This group performed brilliantly, no matter what the bad apple did. The researchers watched the videotapes, trying to figure out why. And they traced it all back to one person, a guy we'll call Jonathan. Jonathan wasn't a traditional leader. He didn't take charge or give orders. Instead, he was a master of belonging cues. When the bad apple would act like a jerk, Jonathan would lean in, smile, and diffuse the tension with a simple question. He'd ask others, "Hey, what do you think of this?" He radiated an energy that said, "This is a safe place. We are all connected here." He made it safe for everyone else to contribute, and by doing so, he neutralized the bad apple's toxicity. Jonathan's group succeeded not because they were smarter, but because they were safer. This principle plays out in the real world in dramatic ways. Coyle points to the race in the early 2000s to build the first great internet advertising engine. The overwhelming favorite was a company called Overture. They had the money, the experience, the brilliant founder. They were the business students. Their competitor was a young, scrappy company called Google. They were the kindergartners. Google's project, AdWords, was struggling badly. Searches were producing ridiculous ads. A search for a Kawasaki H1B motorcycle might bring up ads for immigration lawyers. It was a mess. One day, Google's founder, Larry Page, printed out examples of these failures, scrawled "These ads suck" in big letters, and pinned it to a bulletin board in the company kitchen. Then he left. That note was a signal. It wasn't a formal memo. It was a raw, unfiltered call to action. It created a moment of shared vulnerability. And late that Friday, an engineer named Jeff Dean, who didn't even work on the AdWords team, saw the note. He had his own mountain of work to do, but something about the problem sparked an idea. He didn't ask for permission. He just dove in. He worked all weekend, through the night on Sunday, and by 5 a.m. on Monday, he had emailed a fix. That fix unlocked the problem. AdWords took off, becoming the engine that would fund nearly everything Google did for the next decade. Overture, meanwhile, was bogged down in bureaucracy and infighting. They were managing status. Google didn't win because it was smarter. It won because it was safer. It was a place where an engineer from another department felt secure enough to jump in and solve a massive problem without being asked. This idea of safety is so powerful that it can even transcend the hatred of war. On Christmas Eve of 1914, in the muddy, miserable trenches of World War I, something incredible happened. German and Allied soldiers, who had been trying to kill each other for months, spontaneously stopped fighting. It started with songs. A Christmas carol would float from one trench, and the other side would applaud, then sing one of their own. Soon, soldiers cautiously climbed out of their trenches, unarmed, and walked into no man's land. They shook hands, exchanged small gifts of chocolate and cigarettes, and even played soccer together. Historians call it the Christmas truce. It wasn't a planned event ordered by generals. In fact, the generals were horrified. It was a moment of connection that bubbled up from the soldiers themselves. But why? It wasn't just the magic of Christmas. Coyle explains that for weeks leading up to that day, the two sides had been sending tiny belonging cues back and forth. Because the trenches were so close, they could hear each other. They recognized they had the same daily routines. They developed informal micro-truces, stopping the shooting during mealtimes, or when supplies were being delivered. Each of these small moments was a signal. I see you. We are the same. We are safe, for now. They had, without realizing it, built a fragile foundation of psychological safety. The Christmas truce was just the moment when that hidden foundation became visible to the whole world. This brings us to a crucial point. Building safety isn't a one-time event. It's a continuous process of sending and receiving signals. It's like tending to a flame. Which brings us to one of the most masterful flame tenders in the world, Greg Popovich, the coach of the San Antonio Spurs, the most successful professional sports team in America over the last 2 decades. Popovich is known for being a hard-nosed, demanding, and often volcanic coach. He yells at his star players. He can be brutally honest. From the outside, he looks like the opposite of a safety builder. So how does he create the most cohesive, unselfish team in all of sports? Because the yelling is only one part of the message. Popovich is relentlessly sending belonging cues. He is obsessed with connection. He touches players on the arm, looks them right in the eye, and has deep conversations with them about everything except basketball, politics, history, food, and wine. He famously flew to the Virgin Islands to spend 4 days with a young Tim Duncan before drafting him, just to get to know him as a person. They talked about everything but basketball. After a devastating, last-second loss in the NBA Finals, a loss so painful one player described it as like death, Popovich's first command was, "Family, everybody to the restaurant." He gathered his shattered team, along with their families, and spent the night not dissecting the loss, but reconnecting, reminding them of who they were together. He was filling their cups. His harsh feedback works because it's delivered inside a relationship of deep trust and connection. It's what researchers call magical feedback. It's a phrase that has 3 parts. 1. You are part of this group. 2. This group is special. We have high standards. 3. I believe you can reach those standards. Popovich's yelling isn't just yelling. It's his way of saying, we have high standards here. But it's always paired with an ocean of signals that say, you are part of this group, and I believe in you. That is the essence of building safety. It's about creating an environment where people feel seen, connected, and secure enough to bring their whole selves to the work. But safety is just the beginning. It's the soil. Once you have fertile soil, you need to plant a seed. You need to create the kind of trusting cooperation that allows a group to actually perform. And that leads us to the second, and perhaps most counterintuitive, skill of the culture code. On July 10, 1989, United Airlines Flight 232 was cruising peacefully over Iowa when a loud explosion rocked the plane. The tail engine had disintegrated, and flying shrapnel had severed all of the hydraulic lines. This was a catastrophic failure. It meant the pilots, Captain Al Haynes and his crew, had lost all ability to control the plane. The yokes were useless. The plane was lurching wildly, tilting so far to the right it felt like it was about to cartwheel out of the sky. The odds of losing all hydraulics were calculated at 1 in a billion. Airlines didn't even train for it, because it was considered 100% fatal. In the cockpit, there was a moment of peak confusion. The pilots were wrestling with the dead controls, their knuckles white. And in that moment of terror, Captain Haynes, the man everyone was looking to for answers, said 4 of the most important words in the history of aviation. Anybody have any ideas? That simple question was an admission. It was a signal of profound vulnerability. It wasn't a command, it was a plea. I don't know what to do. I need help. This brings us to the second skill of the culture code: share vulnerability. We're taught from a young age that we should hide our weaknesses, that we should project confidence and competence at all times. But Coyle shows us that in great groups, the exact opposite is true. Vulnerability doesn't come after trust, it precedes it. Sharing vulnerability is the mechanism that builds trust. When Captain Haynes admitted he was lost, it opened the door for cooperation. A passenger named Denny Fitch, a pilot trainer who happened to be on the flight, was called to the cockpit. He saw the chaos and said, "Tell me what you want, and I'll help you." Another signal of vulnerability? Not taking charge, but offering to serve. Together, these men, shoulder to shoulder, did the impossible. They learned to fly a crippled DC-10 using only the throttles of the 2 remaining engines, something no pilot had ever done before. Their communication was clunky, filled with questions and repetitions. But they were building a shared brain, figuring out the problem together. Against all odds, they managed to guide the plane towards Sioux City for an emergency landing. The crash was horrific, but miraculously, 185 of the 296 people on board survived. Later, in simulations, experienced pilots tried to replicate what the crew of Flight 232 did. They ran the simulation 28 times. Every single time, the plane crashed long before it ever reached the airport. The crew of Flight 232 survived not because of their individual skill, but because they were willing to be vulnerable together. This dynamic is what Coyle calls a vulnerability loop. It works like this. 1. Person A sends a signal of vulnerability. 2. Person B detects that signal. 3. Person B responds by signaling their own vulnerability. This exchange creates a shared norm. It flips a switch in our brains that says, it's safe to cooperate here. We're in this together. We see this pattern in all of the great groups Coyle studied. At Pixar, they have something called the brain trust. When a movie is in development, the director brings it to a group of the studio's most experienced filmmakers. The feedback is brutally candid. They tell directors that their characters are boring, their stories are confusing, their jokes aren't funny. Ed Catmull, Pixar's president, says, "All our movies suck at first." The brain trust is where they admit that vulnerability and start the hard work of fixing it together. The Navy SEALs have a similar ritual called an after-action review, or R. Immediately after every mission, no matter how successful, they gather in a circle. There's no rank. They put their weapons down and go over every decision, asking 3 questions. What went well? What went wrong? How will we fix it next time? These sessions can be raw and emotional, but they are the engine of improvement. One SEAL commander says the most important 4 words a leader can say are, "I screwed that up." It's a signal of vulnerability that gives everyone else permission to be honest, to learn from mistakes, and to build a shared mental model of how to be better. This muscle of shared vulnerability is built through shared struggle. Coyle tells the story of Draper Kaufman, the founder of the precursor to the Navy SEALs. Kaufman designed a training program based on a simple, brutal idea, to force teams into a state of constant, shared vulnerability. The most iconic part of this training is called Log PT. A team of 6 trainees has to lift and carry a 250-pound telephone pole for what feels like an eternity. It's agonizing. But the point isn't just the pain. The point is that you cannot do it alone. If one person falters, everyone feels it. The others have to instantly adjust, taking on more of the load to keep the log steady. It's a physical conversation happening through the wood. I'm weakening. We've got you. Your turn. I'm here. It's a constant, real-time vulnerability loop. It strips away individual ego and fuses them into a single, cohesive unit. This same principle, surprisingly, is what fuels the success of great creative groups, like the comedy troupe The Upright Citizens Brigade, or UCB. UCB has produced a staggering number of stars: Amy Poehler, Aziz Ansari, Ed Helms, Kate McKinnon, Donald Glover, the list goes on. Their secret weapon is a long, complex, and notoriously difficult improv game called the Herald. Most improv is about quick, funny jokes. The Herald is the opposite. It's a 40-minute, multi-layered performance that almost always fails spectacularly. It forces comedians to let go of their ego, to stop trying to be the funniest person on stage, and instead to listen, support, and build something together. It's a creative version of Log PT. It's designed to make them vulnerable, together, over and over, until cooperation becomes second nature. The power of this skill is that it creates a group that can solve problems that seem impossible. Coyle shares the story of the DARPA Red Balloon Challenge. The government agency hid 10 large red weather balloons in secret locations across the entire United States and offered a $40,000 prize to the first team to find them all. The task was so immense, one intelligence expert called it impossible. Hundreds of brilliant teams from universities and tech companies jumped in. Most of them built sophisticated tools, satellite image analysis, social media crawlers. They took a top-down, centralized approach. The winning team, from MIT, had a different idea. They found out about the challenge just 4 days before it started. They had no time to build anything fancy. So they created a simple website with a powerful invitation. It said, "If you help us find a balloon, we'll pay you $2,000. But that's not all. We'll also pay the person who invited you $1,000. And the person who invited them $500, and so on." The other team's message was, "Help us, and you might win." It encouraged hoarding information. MIT's message was a vulnerability loop. We can't do this alone. If you help us, we will all share in the reward. It created a cascade of trusting cooperation. Within 9 hours, their network of 4,665 people had found all 10 balloons. They won because they understood that creating cooperation isn't about incentives or technology. It's about creating relationships of mutual risk. Building safety creates the foundation. Sharing vulnerability builds the trust that allows a team to cooperate on that foundation. But what are they cooperating for? What direction are they moving in? This brings us to the third and final skill of the culture code. Dash. In September 1982, Johnson & Johnson faced an unimaginable crisis. 6 people in Chicago died after taking extra-strength Tylenol capsules that had been laced with cyanide. Panic swept the nation. In a matter of hours, Johnson & Johnson went from being one of the most trusted brands in the world to a purveyor of poison. The company's stock plummeted. Experts declared that the Tylenol brand was finished forever. The company's leaders gathered in a makeshift war room. They had to make hundreds of decisions on the fly, with no playbook. The most critical question was what to do about the 31 million bottles of Tylenol still on shelves across the country. The FBI and the FDA urged them to limit the recall to Chicago, where the poisonings had occurred. A national recall, they argued, would cause unnecessary panic and cost the company a fortune, over $100 million. It was a logical argument. But the CEO, James Burke, and his team ignored it. They made the stunning decision to pull every single bottle of Tylenol off every shelf in America. When asked why, Burke's answer was simple. He pointed to the company's credo, a 311-word document written in 1943 that had been carved into the wall of their headquarters. The very first line reads, "We believe our first responsibility is to the doctors, nurses and patients, to mothers and fathers and all others who use our products and services." That single sentence made an incredibly complex decision feel simple. It wasn't a choice, it was a reflex. This leads us to the third skill of the culture code: establish purpose. Safety and vulnerability are about how a group connects. Purpose is about what they are connecting for. Coyle discovered that great groups are obsessive storytellers. They constantly tell and retell a simple story. This is where we are. This is where we are going. This is what we are about. Purpose isn't about a mystical internal drive. It's about creating simple, clear beacons that focus a group's attention and energy on a shared goal. These are what Coyle calls high-purpose environments. They are filled with small, vivid signals that create a link between the present moment and a future ideal. When you walk into a KIPP school, an incredibly successful network of charter schools, the walls are covered with college pennants. The bathroom mirrors ask, "Where will you go to college?" The message is relentless. This is where you are now, and college is where you are going. This process works because of how our brains are wired. Psychologists have discovered a powerful technique called mental contrasting. It's simple. First, vividly imagine a goal you want to achieve. Then, vividly imagine the obstacles standing in your way. This two-part process, here's where I want to go, and here's what's in my way, creates a powerful motivational link in our brains. It doesn't just make us feel good, it energizes us to act. High-purpose environments do this for an entire group. They create a shared mental map. The Johnson & Johnson credo was that map. Years before the Tylenol crisis, CEO James Burke had sensed that the credo was becoming just a public relations gimmick. So he held a series of meetings where he challenged his managers, "If you can't live by its principles, we ought to tear it off the walls." They debated it, wrestled with it, and ultimately, recommitted to it. They were refreshing the story. So when the crisis hit, the story was alive in their minds. It guided thousands of decisions made by hundreds of people with a splendid consistency. Coyle shows that there are two main ways leaders build purpose, depending on the goal. The first is for proficiency, when the goal is to perform a task with machine-like reliability, the same way every time. This is what Danny Meyer does in his world-famous restaurants, like Union Square Cafe and Shake Shack. Meyer's world is built on a universe of simple, memorable catchphrases, or heuristics. Phrases like, "Read the guest," "athletic hospitality," "collecting the dots and connecting the dots," and "making the charitable assumption." Each phrase is a tiny story, a mental model for how to behave. Making the charitable assumption, for example, means if a customer is rude, assume they're having a bad day, not that they're a bad person. It's an if/then rule that guides behavior in a moment of uncertainty. These catchphrases aren't just cheesy slogans. They are the operating code for the group. They are repeated and modeled relentlessly until they become, as one employee put it, part of the oxygen. Meyer acts like a lighthouse, beaming out a constant, clear signal of purpose. We take care of people. The second type of leadership is for creativity, when the goal is not to get from A to B, but to navigate to an unknown destination, X. This is the world of Ed Catmull, the president of Pixar. Catmull isn't a lighthouse, he's more like the engineer of a ship. He doesn't steer. He roves around below decks, checking the systems, making sure the team has the tools and support they need to navigate the treacherous journey of creating something new. His purpose building is about protecting the team's creative autonomy. He surrounds them with systems like the dailies and the brain trust, which are designed to help them see their own mistakes and find their own solutions. His catchphrases are simple and open-ended. Fail early, fail often. Face toward the problems. His goal is not to provide a map, but to equip the explorers. The proof of his method came when Disney bought Pixar and put Catmull in charge of their struggling animation studio. Disney Animation had been failing for years. Catmull came in, changed none of the people, but completely rewired the systems. He took creative power away from the executives and gave it to the directors. He created the story trust, their version of the brain trust. He built a culture of safety and vulnerability. The result? The same group of people who had been failing for a decade suddenly started producing a string of massive hits: Tangled, Wreck-It Ralph, Frozen, and Zootopia. He didn't give them a new purpose. He created the conditions where they could discover their purpose, together. And that, in the end, is the final secret of the culture code. Building a great culture is not about being a certain way. It's about doing certain things. It's about creating safety, sharing vulnerability, and telling the story of us, over and over again, until it becomes the truth. Commentary. When you step back and look at the 3 skills Daniel Coyle lays out in the Culture Code, build safety, share vulnerability, establish purpose, what you see is not just a recipe for a successful team, but a blueprint for a more deeply connected and meaningful way of living and working together. What I find so powerful about this book is how it demystifies what we often think of as magic. We talk about teams having great chemistry as if it's some random, unpredictable force of nature. Coyle shows us that it's not magic at all. It's a science. It's a set of skills that can be learned, practiced, and mastered. The first lesson, build safety, is a profound reminder that connection comes first. Before we can perform, before we can innovate, before we can even begin to work well together, we have to feel safe. This is so fundamental, yet it's something we often overlook. We push for results, we demand performance, but we forget to tend to the human foundation of trust. The simple act of listening intently, of asking questions, of signaling that someone is valued, these aren't soft skills, they are the bedrock of high performance. The second lesson, share vulnerability, is perhaps the most courageous. It asks us to go against our deepest instincts for self-protection. It tells us that strength is not found in hiding our weaknesses, but in revealing them to one another. The vulnerability loop is such a powerful concept because it shows that trust isn't something you build slowly over time and then decide to cash in. It's the act of being vulnerable itself that creates trust in an instant. It's a leap of faith that creates the solid ground beneath your feet. And finally, establish purpose. This is the skill that gives the first 2 meaning. Safety and vulnerability create a powerful, connected group, but purpose gives that group a direction. What I love about Coyle's take on purpose is that it isn't about some grand, abstract mission statement. It's about small, vivid, everyday signals. It's about telling a story that answers two simple questions: who are we, and where are we going? So, how can you start applying these ideas right now in your own life? You don't need to be a CEO or a coach. You can start small. 1. Focus on one-on-one safety. The next time you're in a conversation, practice being the best listener the other person has ever met. Put your phone away. Lean in. Ask questions. Don't interrupt to add your own story. Just signal, in every way you can, I am listening to you. What you say matters. You will be amazed at how this small shift changes the dynamic. 2. Dare to be vulnerable first. The next time you're in a group and you don't know something, or you've made a mistake, admit it. Say the words, "I'm not sure," or "I screwed that up, my apologies." It will feel uncomfortable for a second, but watch what happens. You are sending a signal of safety to everyone else in the room. You are opening a vulnerability loop. 3. Tell the story of us. In any group you're a part of, a study group, a project team, even your family, start defining what you're about. Create a few simple catchphrases that capture your goals. Talk about where you're headed. Remind each other why your shared work matters. Make the purpose feel real and present. These skills aren't complicated, but they require consistent practice. They are muscles. The more you use them, the stronger your groups will become. Because in the end, the secret to building something great isn't finding a group of superstars. It's about learning the simple, powerful language that allows ordinary people to connect, to trust, and to work together as one. That was a journey through the core ideas of the Culture Code by Daniel Coyle. We've explored the secrets of what makes great groups tick, but I'll be honest with you, a summary is like looking at a map of a beautiful country. It can show you the major landmarks, but it can't replace the experience of actually walking the terrain yourself. The real magic of this book is in the stories, in the details, in the quiet moments when Coyle's writing makes a concept click in a way you didn't expect. This summary is your map, designed to help you decide if this is a journey worth taking. If anything we've talked about today has sparked your curiosity, I truly encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning. It's an experience that could genuinely change how you lead, how you collaborate, and how you connect with the people who matter most in your life. Also, if you found this summary valuable, and you're hungry to learn more from the world's most brilliant minds, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe. We're building a community here, dedicated to exploring life-changing books together, and I'd be honored to have you join us on our next adventure. Let's keep growing together.